On April 27th, 1805, the expedition enters present-day Montana.
A singular day after entering Montana, these two fellow explorers, Lewis and Clark, encountered what I like to call the Rizzle Bear. The Rizzle Bear, if you don't know, is a grizzly bear. They described this grizzly bear as a yellow-brown bear, which was kind of weird. You know, I don't see how a grizzle bear would be yellow. But then again, this was a couple hundred years ago. You see, when they saw this bear, it was a pack of two. And this bear, well, you know what happens when you see a grizzly bear, okay? These guys decided it'd be a good idea to shoot at the rizzle bear. Well, one of them went down, the other one ran off. Lewis, since he was walking, decided it'd be a good idea with his friend to chase the grizzle bizzle bear. Which kind of seems like a bad idea. After shooting at it a couple more times, it finally went down. They collected as much data on it as they possibly could, sent it back. After collecting their data, they realized that the grizzle bizzle bear is tough. And for some crazy reason, they documented that it's not that dangerous. It's just, they said it wasn't that dangerous.
On July 13th, 1805, Lewis and his party reached a portage camp just above the Great Falls. Lewis went to explore the Marias River, but the Blackfeet caused them to retreat back to the Missouri.
And during this confrontation with the Blackfeet is when the only documented murder happened on the Lewis and Clark journey.
They rendezvous with the men who portaged around the canoes around the Great Falls.
The reason for having to portage around the Great Falls is because it was the Great Falls. If you don't know what that means, here in Montana we have a town called Great Falls. It's a nice little town. But if you're portaging through the Missouris 200 years ago, that's kind of bad. Because it is a giant waterfall in the Great Falls. So, good luck riding a canoe down that.
On July 17th, 1805, Lewis and Clark arrive at the Three Forks, which they later named Jefferson, Madison, and Gallatin.
Fun fact, the day they were leaving the Three Forks, Lewis wrote something sus, you could say, in his journal. He was talking about the morning of that day. And one of the things that happened that morning was the birds. And quote unquote, he literally said, the birds sounded very gay.
To make their trip, they would need the help of the Shoshone Indians. During this time, Clark couldn't walk very well due to a boil on his ankle. Instead, he would command the main party in the canoes. On July 19th, 1805, the expedition encounters a rock formation and names it the Gates to the Rocky Mountains. This is located near present-day Helena.
We can't forget the entire time Lewis and Clark have been in Montana, in their journals, they have not stopped complaining about the temperature. Every single day, they say, wow, it's cold.
On Sunday, July 28th, 1805, Lewis wrote in his diary that Clark was very sick the previous night, but was feeling better after medicine. At this time, Clark was still had a boil on his ankle, so he wasn't able to walk very well. Lewis wrote that he would have Clark command the rapid. This evening, hunters returned with 8 deer and 2 elk. Their camp is on the spot the Snake Indians were encamped. At 8 o'clock on July 30th, 1805, Lewis and Clark went 13.5 miles up the North Fork. On August 10th, they reached the forks of the Beaverhead. They followed the Western Fork into a valley the captains later called Shoshone Cave. On August 12th, 1805, Lewis and Clark continued up Indian trails, later named Trail Creek. A short distance further was the ridge of the Continental Divide.
You see, Lewis and Clark had a big problem trying to get over the Continental Divide. Their problem was they didn't have horses. You see, the Continental Divide is a giant range of mountains that stretches from the tippy tops of Atlanta to the downy tops of Texas. It goes far, even down into Mexico, I believe. It's a big thing. And it's pretty high, too. I think the peak is about maybe, I don't know, tall. But it's pretty tall. And they had to cross it. Which, it's not a fun task to cross some really tall mountains without any horses or anything. Which is when the Sajicahuewa came in. No one knows how to pronounce her name. That definitely was not it. But Sajicahuewa was the one that helped him get over the Crossy Mountains. You see, these Crossy Mountains were very hard to cross. That's why I call them the Crossy Mountains. They used Sajicahuewa when she got to her tribe to get horses and cross. They crossed with lots of pain, actually. It was very horrible and cold. They really complained about the cold then, too. Like, remember how much that I told you they complained before? Now, this was way worse. Yeah, it was really bad. Apparently, it is cold.
On September 13th, 1805, the expedition crosses Lilo Pass and enters into present-day Idaho. On June 29th, a year later, 1806, the expedition crosses Lilo Pass from Idaho back into present-day Montana. On July 6, 1806, Clark's group traverses Gibson's Pass, also known as the Continental Divide. The expedition camped near the confluence of Beaverhead Creek and Blackfoot River during this time. On August 3, 1806, Clark's group arrives at the mouth of the Yellowstone River. Lewis passed the border on August 7, 1806. During the rest of the expedition, they are not in Montana at all. In Fort Mandan, Lewis and Clark met a French-Canadian trapper and hired him as an interpreter. They allowed his wife, Sacagawea, to join them. Lewis and Clark hoped Sacagawea would help them communicate with Shoshone Indians they might encounter later on. On February 11, 1805, Sacagawea gave birth. She named him John Baptiste. On July 7, 1805, Lewis and Clark sent some crew and a keelboat with zoological and botanical samples, maps and reports, and letters to St. Louis, while the rest of them went on to the Pacific Ocean. Lewis and Clark referred to the Shoshone Indians as Snake Indians. On July 25, 1806, Clark carved his name and date into a rock near Yellowstone River. He named it Pompey's Pillar after Sacagawea's son's nickname.